Vamos a continuar con la sesión número 2, nuevas oportunidades en el mercado de GNL en América Latina. Vamos a invitar en estos momentos al señor Sergio Chapa, analista senior de GNL, la consultora Poten Partners. El señor Sergio nos va a hablar sobre las crecientes oportunidades en el mercado de GNL en América Latina y el Caribe, con un análisis profundo de las tendencias claves de GNL en la región. Así es que bienvenido.
Okay, thank you. Gracias. Thank you all. Wow, what a great morning already, huh? Like a lot of great presentations. I just want to thank Kenna real quick for everything. It's so great to be here after Cartagena this year. Last year was amazing. This year is just shaping up to be an even better conference, I think. It's just been great. Let's just go ahead and get started. For those of you that don't know, my name is Sergio Chapa. I'm senior LNG analyst for Poten Partners in Houston. I cover the Americas for LNG, that's Alaska to Argentina. For those of you that aren't familiar with Poten, we started about 80 years ago as a ship broker business. So we've got three flavors at Poten, I guess you could call it. Shipbroking, consulting, and I work for the business intelligence unit, which puts together all these monthly reports on LNG contract pricing, supply and demand, and kind of project tracking. Let's see here now. I know we've only got 15 minutes, so I'm going to run through everything real quick. Right now, we're just going to go do a quick market snapshot of Latin America, go through the export projects, import projects, and then finally, this is what everybody loves, is the contracts and pricing for all that. Just a quick market introduction. For our purposes here today, Latin America is, what we're just calling it, everything south of the United States, okay? It's a region of 664 million people. It's a region with very uneven distribution of resources. In most cases, the natural gas is very far away from demand centers. So obviously you need to move products like LNG on tankers and via pipelines. It's also a very uneven region in terms of consumption. As you can see here, the energy consumption per capita, when we did this in like translated to MMBTU per person, in the United States, the average person consumes about the equivalent of nearly 300 MMBTU, per year. Whereas like here in Panama, which is very developed, all these towers, all this air conditioning, it's about 86. You see Mexico in the middle range and Brazil too, the largest nation, 50 MMBTU per person per year. Then you go down to the Dominican Republic, and then Nicaragua, and then at the bottom you have Haiti, which is an average of 3.4 MMBTU per person per year. That's like the United States average person consumes nearly 100 times the energy as the average person in Haiti. Okay. We spend a lot of time doing forecasts and tracking of regasification and liquefaction capacity in markets. Now this is just regas capacity and liquefaction capacity, not the actual imports. This is just the plants and at their peak operation, peak capabilities. We're forecasting, I know last year we spoke that there was a slim possibility of Latin America becoming a net exporter, but a lot has changed over the past year, and we'll get into that later, but for now we're keeping the forecast for Latin America as a net importer of LNG. As you can see here, there is some growth potential for liquefaction and exports, but overall the region will remain a net importer of LNG. You have Brazil as the largest importer. You have potential export projects in places like Mexico and in Argentina, but we'll get into that in just a second. Okay, so taking that previous chart, then you break down the liquefaction, some of our forecasting here. Current liquefaction supply is about nearly 21 million tons of LNG per year. We have a new entrant in the exports game, Mexico, that just sent out their first export cargo earlier this month, and it made it to Rotterdam, to Europe, from Altamira FLNG, New Fortress Energy's project. Now they're in the game, and they have a capacity of 1.4 MTPA. So the longtime players, you can see them there at the bottom in the dark blue and the light blue. You see Trinidad and Tobago, and you see Peru LNG. just steady over the years, and it will remain so. Our forecast. That's just capacity again. Now, like in Trinidad's case, they have the capacity, they have the trains, and they're capable of producing that much. Do they always? No, because there's a declining feed gas in the area, and I know there'll be some speakers later who will be speaking about new feed gas possibilities for Trinidad and Tobago, and that's very exciting. But just overall capacity remains the same. You see here at 2024 Mexico entering the market as an exporter with capacity, and then you see some volumes incrementally added when Energía Costa Azul in Baja California comes online. Next year should begin commissioning. There should be a first cargo. It'll enter commercial operations in the spring of 2026. And there you see some potential in Mexico to add additional export capacity, perhaps a small or medium scale project. You can see down in that bucket down at the bottom the proposed projects. Now there's a lot of proposed projects in Mexico, Argentina. There's one in Suriname, and now there's one in Guyana. Not all these proposed projects, as everywhere in the world, not all proposed projects will make it. We do forecast and anticipate some supplies from Mexico, Argentina, and perhaps Guyana and Suriname making it into the market over the next 5 to 10 years. And so we've started to look at them in our forecasts, and we adjust these constantly. These forecasts we adjust monthly based on the news and new information that we receive about these projects and their development. What is a challenge for some is an opportunity for others. We spent a lot of time this year at Poten tracking the regulatory issues in the United States. And, not everyone here may be familiar, but when you build an LNG export project in the United States, you need two key permits. One is from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which we call FERC, and that's the construction permit. The other one is an export permit that you get from the Department of Energy. And that's basically, we call it the non-FTA permit, the non-free trade agreement permit. It's real easy to get a free trade agreement export permit because you're just sending to free trade agreement partners. But that non-FTA is critical because that goes that clears an LNG project to send cargoes to Europe and Asia, where prices are much, much higher. And so right now in the United States, we have about roughly 6 projects under construction, like half a dozen, and with a total capacity of 82.5 MMTPA. And more or less, those projects, regulatory-wise, are fine. The ones that we highlighted in red right there are projects that are going to require permit extensions. And I know it looks kind of small, but we'll send out the PDF later, and y'all can zoom in and look at it more closely. But so some of these projects will require permit extensions, and under the current regulatory environment, nobody's really expecting any new permits until after the U.S. election. The Biden administration and the Department of Energy have pretty much put a pause on all extensions and new permits. But these volumes are coming online between now. You can expect another 82 MTPA between now and 2028. That's just what's under construction. There's another bucket of projects in the U.S. These are like fully permitted pre-FID projects. Look at all that red there, guys. A lot of these projects are going to require permit extensions from the Department of Energy for their non-FTA export permits. And we'll just have to see how all that plays out next year once the election's over, once a new energy secretary is appointed, once all the deputies are appointed, once everybody's sworn in. We'll see about all this. Let me just go back. So I highlighted some FERC permits too that require extensions. FERC has been operating pretty much normally. If you need an extension permit from FERC, they've been going through their normal regulatory process. It's an independent agency. It's not quite the same process as DOE or the same politics. It's independent, and it's been functioning so, and they have been granting extensions. So that's the good news there. There's a couple more buckets of U.S. LNG projects. There's like the partially permitted projects, and you can see there that at least 4 of them are still waiting for decisions on their non-FTA export permits. One project has been waiting 5 years for a decision. They have their FERC permit. They have nearly sold out, and they've been waiting 5 years for a permit decision for exports. There's yet another bucket of project in the United States, the pre-permit, pre-FID projects. Some of them have made commercial successes. You know, they're household words in the LNG industry, and they've been able to already sell volumes even without having a single permit yet. They've been able to commercialize their projects. So why do I bring this up? Okay, it's everything going on in the United States right now. That's a challenge for U.S. developers, but it could be an opportunity for LNG exporters overseas, say in places like Argentina, in Mexico, or Canada, or Mozambique, or elsewhere around the world. This is an opportunity. What is a challenge for some is an opportunity for others. And we've been busy tracking all those developments. Okay, so we wanted to talk about new opportunities in Latin America's LNG markets. Latin America is a little bit different. U.S. developers, they need long-term contracts, and they need large volumes. 1 MTPA sold for 20 years to a credit-worthy counterparty. That's not necessarily the reality here in the Latin America market, where you need small volumes on seasonal or short-term basis. So that doesn't always align. The long-term contracts that you do have in the Latin American market are typically signed by between buyers in the market, and then like portfolio players like BP, Shell, Total, and that way the buyer doesn't have to charter a vessel. They don't have to handle the deliveries. It's all done. Behind the scenes by the portfolio player or the aggregator or a trader. But where there are opportunities, I think Freddie and some others alluded to this earlier, is kind of like in more smaller scale LNG deliveries. Now you could do the small scale tankers, or you could do ISO containers, or you could do trucking. We're already seeing a few small-scale liquefaction projects approved in Mexico. I think there's 3 that just got permitted this year. We're talking 100,000 gallons per day at each of these facilities. I remember one is from Jalisco, one is in Sinaloa, and they're basically projects that are at the end of the pipelines or along pipelines, and they just build a lateral feeding a small amount of volume, maybe 10 or 15,000. 10 or 15 million cubic feet per day, which is about 100,000 gallons of LNG per day. And from there, it goes out to customers in Mexico at on ISO containers or tanker trucks. And we see the same kind of potential in other markets in Latin America, like in places like Brazil or Argentina or even Peru, where you're not going to have like a giant ship pull up to a port, offload the LNG, but rather you need that last mile customer at a mining operation or a maquiladora or they need that energy at their location, and it's not served by a pipeline, so it's delivered instead via truck or via rail or another. Going back to the opportunities here, there's not just those. ISO or small-scale liquefaction plants, but there's also bunkering, which Ian covered quite well, I think, and virtual pipelines, basically trucking and getting everything from these new small-scale plants out into the market, distributed out there. What's good about, or what's really interesting about these deliveries by tanker truck and by ISO container is that you can command a premium on prices. You can get a higher price for your gas, but the only problem there, it's not quite as a volume. Like a tanker truck holds 10,000 gallons of LNG, and maybe you could get the equivalent of $14 per MMBTU, but it's a very small MMBTU. It's a very small volume. Okay, so that was exports. Trying to look at the import market right now. There's roughly about a dozen importers in the Latin American market. Basically, regasification capacity, we see it just going up slightly once Nicaragua comes into operations, and a New Fortress Energy Nicaraguan project comes into operations later this year. So we see it just growing a little bit right now. and then we see it plateauing and then declining. You got to remember that some countries like in Mexico or in Argentina, they're switching from imports to exports. There'll still be some imports in Mexico just because, where New Fortress is built in La Paz, there's no pipelines that serve the area, so they'll still need to continue to import in that particular corner of Mexico. But the rest of the country's covered adequately by pipelines from the U.S. So we see, regas capacity going away in other parts of Mexico. And as Argentina becomes more energy independent, there'll be less need for imports in that market. So you see a decline, but it just remains kind of flat, this regasification capacity. Again, the dark blue at the bottom, Brazil, will remain the region's largest importer, both in terms of regas capacity and in actual imports. And of course, that is all seasonally driven. Now, looking at the opportunities at the market for imports, Freddie had a really good slide earlier showing the kind of potential import projects over there. But a lot of them weren't necessarily these large-scale projects. And so, again, like in Latin America, what I think is like small is the new big in Latin America. You're not going to get these big ships, and you're not going to sell the whole volume to a single customer. Maybe the idea is that you get a tanker here, you import the gas, store it in a tank, and then it's just divided out and distributed to smaller buyers. Someone has to assume the risk there as the overall importer selling to smaller customers. That's a really interesting concept. And then like what I really liked about Freddie's slide is it kind of showed the islands and everything and all the projects. Each island right now, a lot of them are dependent on diesel fuel, but a lot of them are willing to make the switch to LNG, and that's by small scale tanker, that's by ISO container. You see several islands that are already island nations already importing LNG via ISO container, like Antigua, Barbuda, Bahamas, Barbados. Even Haiti imports LNG via ISO container for some manufacturing facilities to power some manufacturing facilities. The potential is there for other island nations to join in the game and to start importing and start the switch. We already see like Eagle LNG kind of carving out new markets and new customers in the Caribbean on some of the island nations like like Aruba and Curacao. So that'll be interesting how to play it. Again, remember, small is the new big for Latin America. Now, one of the things that we always go through at Poten is our specialty is contract pricing. So we keep track of both long-term prices and spot market prices. You can see here in Latin, and this is just spot market prices in Latin America. You can see how volatile it is. You see how the Russian invasion, how prices shot up dramatically. So far, I think the highest price ever paid by a Latin American country was Argentina in October 2021, $37 for MMBTU. At the time, they were having to compete with European markets, which were paying the equivalent price. The lowest price ever paid was July 2019 by Mexico, $4.10 per MMBTU. Boy, don't you wish you could pay that now, right? And right about now, you see how volatile it is. It goes down, it goes back up. Huge spike, goes back down, goes back up. Right now, the spot market prices in Latin America were around $9. They've kind of increased to around $12 right now, based on the current activity that we see. So looking at long-term contracts, these are sales and purchase agreements, SPAs in the U.S. Right now, you see earlier in before the Russian invasion in Ukraine, you can see liquefaction fees in these SPA contracts below $2. Boy, those times have changed. You have not only the increased demand and post-war, you have rising EPC costs, you have inflation, you have a labor shortage in the United States. And so prices have increased. They're kind of right now sitting at the range of perhaps $245 to $260. The most common thing we hear in all these new SPAs that have been coming out this year is $240, $250, $260. It's just been going around, bouncing around at that range right now. we also let's see, here it is. Okay, yes, okay. So that's just long-term 20-year SPAs. Now, if you do shorter-term deals, you're gonna pay a higher price, and that would the previous slide was FOB. This is if you get DES, you're gonna pay higher, and that's what happens with a lot of these tenders in Latin America. They're DES, and you end up paying a higher price. You see here like prices for DES from the U.S. like around the $4 per MMBTU range. And then down at the bottom, you see some of the Mexico deals. They're a little bit different than the SPAs from the U.S. They have a higher liquefaction fee, like around maybe $3.50 or so. But then it's offset because the gas is cheaper because it's Waha based, and then you also have savings on transit on the time, and you don't have to pass through the Panama Canal. So it about evens out. It's competitive with the Gulf Coast. Let's take a look here. We also keep track of Brent LNG prices, oil-based, oil-linked prices. Right now, the big takeaway here is that Brent LNG prices are currently hovering around above 12%. That's actually a decrease from what we saw previously. And again, the same theme that applies to other SPAs and other markets or other indexes. The shorter term you have, the higher a price you'll pay. So you see some of those high percentages, like as high 20% or higher, but those were for short-term contracts. So, and that'll just wrap it up right there. I think we did our 15 minutes. Thank you.